when I was invited to speak about fake news, right? It was like, fake news, right? Um, I had one prior engagement in 2017 in Greece, all right? And they wanted me to speak about fake news. And I was like, fake news. Because I'm a broadcast journalist by profession in the 1990s, right? So it's either news or it's not news. There's nothing in between. So it's like the yin and yang is news or not news. If you don't make it for the news at 8 o'clock, all right, for the normal bulletin, it means that you miss your deadline, all right? So that's not news. So when this coin came up, right, fake news, and I was discussing with some of my friends that were also ex-journalists and present journalists, and like, that's like an oxymoron, isn't it? It's like news, fake news. It doesn't work. All right. So every time I see fake news, I was smirk. All right. It's not very professional, but it's funny. Okay. But let me just give you a few examples, all right, of what research has said. Okay. So what is fake news? Is there such a thing? All right. For many of you, I hope that there are journalists also. All right. I did invite an old friend of mine, Sohani Sulaiman, to actually come for the talk. It's interesting because fake news or news articles that are intentionally and verifiable false and could mislead readers is not a new phenomenon. So this was in 2017 when it started, all right? So in fact, Gelzer in 2017 also claimed that fake news has been used as a political tool as far back as 1782. So it has been going on, but in 2017, it suddenly exploded, right? And why? Why did it explode? We will see who the culprit is. Okay, so in 2017, in the United States, all right, the president at that time was President Trump. He labeled mainstream newspaper media, such as the New York Times, as fake news, all right? So this was in 2018. And he accused journalists of spreading fake news about him, whether it was true, it was not true. I mean, most of it was true, all right, but it was very negative against him. So he just decided to accuse journalists of spreading fake news. If you are familiar with the New York Times, right, it's a very reputable newspaper. So a lot of people read New York Times, although there's a difference in opinion, all right? It's up to you, okay? And then there's research also in 2017 and 2019, all right, where it was reported that Americans had consumed an average of 1 to 3 pieces of fake news in the months before the presidential election, right? So how does that work? So after he was elected as president of the United States, Washington Post discovered that Donald Trump had made 10,796 false or misleading claims in the first 869 days of his presidency. So who's the biggest culprit here? All right. So Washington Post actually did this research. That's why it's very interesting to find out what was constituted in terms of fake news, right? And what was the real news that went out. That people tend to believe what fake news is, right? Because it either supports their thinking, all right, but it's very detrimental to the society on the whole because it has a third-person effect. You know, it damages people's reputations. It damages products, it damages brands, it damages stakeholders. So that's why it's not a good phenomenon. And this has started from 2017 and it's still ongoing, all right? And then further to that, I went and found out if there were dictionary definitions, right? A bit skeptical about all this fake news. So I went and looked whether Oxford Dictionary actually had a definition, right? So with the widespread of fake news, it came as no surprise in 2016, and this one, before it even exploded, Oxford Dictionary selected the word post-truth as its word of the year in 2016. What does post-truth mean, even, right? Think about that. So the dictionary defines it as relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. So it has a lot to do with your emotions and your personal belief. Why do people spread fake news? All right, one or two reasons would be, I want to be the first to spread this news, right? I want to be, in journalism, we call it the scoop, right? But even the scoop doesn't work anymore in journalism because of social media, right? In the olden days, when I was still a journalist, if you were a journalist and you got a scoop, right, all the other journalists will hate you, right? Because you got the scoop and none of us got it. But now nobody gets a scoop. And because of this urgency to get the story out, you don't check, okay? And a lot of newspapers, what they do is they do corrections, right? Corrections, or in Malay, it's called ralat, pembetulan. Once you have that, right, people start to question the credibility of your newspaper, the credibility of your newsreels, right? Because corrections, ralat, means you didn't check, especially when it's a catastrophe. Everything is up in the air. This is something that you need to wait for information to come in, all right? So you get something that is factual rather than, okay, I'm just going to print this first and then I'll make corrections later. That's the habit with online versions, okay? So that's actually not good journalism, okay? Then in the following year, Collins Dictionary chose fake news as its word of the year in response to a 365% increase in usage in the Collins corpus of the English language. So now it is even in dictionaries. So this is going to stay for some time, okay? Okay, let's look at the Malaysian scenario. So how is it with Malaysia right now? So in the context of Malaysia, there were a few research that has also been done, okay? If you look at the figures from, these are most recent, okay, that I've picked up. Okay, fake news first emerged prominently within the country's political discourse in 2017. So that's the magic year. Okay. However, bloggers have long posted unsubstantial rumors since the 2008-12 general election. Now, this is an ongoing argument, bloggers. I always have this argument with my students, right? Because I always tell them that bloggers are not journalists. Bloggers are journalist wannabes. Okay, so that gets my students very riled up. The reason is this, right? Journalists, when you work in a newsroom, I think if there are journalists in this group, you would agree with me, right? Journalists have a special training when they go and service newsrooms. Okay, so you have that training. You have gatekeepers. You know what your boundaries are. Although when we were journalists, when I was a journalist at TV3, it was push your boundaries until you get caught, right? But in the 10 years of working at TV3, I never got caught. So I'm quite good in that sense. Okay? I didn't get caught. But even if you get caught and then you get called up and then you say, sorry, ampun tuanku, and then you just go ahead and push your boundaries. That's the way it should be done. Okay, so at the beginning of 2020, COVID-19 hit us unprecedented, okay? Nobody saw it coming. It led to an increase of proliferation of misinformation, disinformation on social media, particularly on the diagnosis, treatment, prevention, and spread of the virus. I'm sure we don't need to get into this, all right? Treatments with warm water, with concoction that you cook. It was fun to read though, but no, that wasn't it. Right? So that was very detrimental. There was a research that was done. It said that one of the participants that was interviewed said, I need to tell, I have a WhatsApp group, right? So I have aunties and uncles that are very elderly and cousins. So I need to be the first to post these news in my WhatsApp group, regardless of whether it is true, it's not true, because if it's not true, I'll just say I'm sorry. But if it's true and they don't follow, then I don't want to be blamed for that. Okay, maybe if it's in your WhatsApp group, is not so bad. But if you're writing for a nation, okay, and then you have an online version that is picked up by other countries, that's not a good thing. In the last couple of years, Malaysia has made the headlines for all the wrong reasons, which is very sad. Okay. So Malaysia's former health minister, Dr. Zulkifli Ahmad, even warned that the misinformation about the virus is a more critical issue than the disease itself, because it became very detrimental, right? So there were a lot of news on social media, and social media is something that you can't curb, right? You ask Gen Z, you ask the millennials, how many hours do they spend on social media? A lot of hours. Huh? After COVID-19 is double, triple the hours of spending on social media. So that didn't help, right? So the more you spend on social media, the more you read all these things that are not true, misinformation, all sorts of nonsense that came out of it, all right? So these are some of the cases in Malaysia, right? Now, how it started. So in April 2020, a total of 200 fake news items were effectively shot down by the Malaysian government rapid response communication team. Undoubtedly, fake news on COVID-19 can harm the social stability, economic growth, and national security of the country. So this was another research that was done, right? So citing national security concerns, Malaysia hastily and briefly enacted the Anti-Fake News Act in 2018. Okay, and then there was the first case. This was the first case, all right? A Danish national was the first to be sentenced under the act in the same year over a YouTube video post under the name Saleh Sulaiman, tongue twister, regarding the killing of a Palestinian university lecturer. Saleh had accused the police of arriving 50 minutes late at the scene and the ambulance of arriving 1 hour later. And then it was an investigation. All right, you can argue who said something, who was right or who was wrong, right? There's always two sides of the story, some people say. But for the journalist, right, it's always more than two sides, all right? It's your side, it's my side, and it's the truth. So that's basically three sides of the story. So even this one you can argue, right? And then there was another research, a few other researches that were done in 2018 and 2020, right? The police denied the claims and asserted that they took only 8 minutes instead to arrive at the scene. Saleh was fined 10,000, but he opted to spend a month in jail. He didn't want to pay the fine. Okay, so the act was abolished the following year after the change of government in GE 14, right? So the act was initially enacted to punish those who maliciously create, publish, or disseminate fake news online or on social media, and those found guilty either face imprisonment up to 6 years or fines up to 500,000. Okay, is that enough? To question whether that is enough in terms of punishment is also a separate discussion, right? I think the bigger question is, how do you catch? How do you catch these people that have spread all this fake news, right? But they can catch because 250 fake news items have been shot down. So they must have a mechanism to catch these people, all right? So who's the culprit? The internet, right? The video that you saw in the beginning before the talk says a lot about this, okay? The internet is the biggest culprit because a lot of people don't want to take responsibility, okay? So the internet comes as no surprise that Malaysia is no stranger to fake news, all right? Malaysians are now easily exposed to fake news than ever before, okay? So this is especially worrisome as in 2018, Edelman Trust Barometer, another research, found that close to 50% of Malaysia admitted to being disengaged with major news organizations as their preferred source of information and opted to rely on social media feeds instead. All right. I don't know what is the age range of the participants. All right. If you're around my age, all right, I'm not going to tell you my age. If you are around my age, right, you would remember watching the news with your parents. All right. I remember watching the news with my late dad, and he always had the control. So there's a lot of power when you have the remote control in your hand, right? So 8 o'clock, everybody sits and watches the news. Now people don't watch the news because they want this flexibility of watching the news when and how in their free time. So it's always online, and it's not necessarily the online versions of the mainstream newspaper that we have, right? Although mainstream newspapers are also not preferred. I think that's the safest thing to say, right? So the report also claimed that 62% of Malaysians were unable to distinguish between true or fake news. Although it is reported that Malaysians are concerned about the spread of fake news, their reliance on social media to obtain information makes them increasingly vulnerable to fraud and fake news. All right? They don't stop to think, this is fake, this is not fake. I'm just going to share. Okay? Because I always tell my students this. If you want to read any kind of news, you can, but you need to come back to mainstream. All right? Maybe that's not the best advice, but in the olden days, it was only that. It was trustworthy. All right. I say that with biasness because I was a broadcast journalist, right? So it was trustworthy. We were the people that people ask, right? We had first-hand news. For example, if you listen to the budget, right? People will ask, Lina, untung tak this time budget? Private sector tak untung lah. Everybody will ask you. And if there's a catastrophe, they will ask you, so what are the numbers that we're looking at, right? Because at one time, as a journalist, you will actually have one assignment that is very difficult to cover, right? For me, it was the Highland Towers. I don't know whether you remember that. If you Google, I think you'll find it. I never really understood what it meant by the phrase, by the smell of death, until I covered that assignment. That was very difficult to do, okay? But if you look at the internet now, right? Now everything is Googleable. That's what I tell my students. But the internet is a culprit also for giving us a platform to disseminate all this, right? So the Star mentioned that the top 5 most prevalent fake news in Malaysia were reported as governance, crime, health, consumerism, and security. And a total of 35% of fake news was on government administrations, while crime-related news accounted for 14%. 37% is high, right? So that's very worrying. Okay. So another 14% was health-related. 13% was on consumer issues, and the remaining 9% of security related. So indeed, social media has become the major source of information for Malaysians, and thus allowing them to become victims of online fake news and disinformation. So this is serious, right? So that brings me to my third point, right? So rules and regulations. This is very important because we need to have these rules and regulations in order for us to try to curb this very serious problem, right? So the MCMC initiated an awareness campaign called Klik Dengan Bijak in 2012, all right, to educate and raise public awareness about internet safety and security among Malaysians of all ages. So this was some of the information taken from their website, all right? So they have done research, all right? They give grants and they encourage the academics to do research on Klik Dengan Bijak, all right? So in 2017, again, MCMC launched a web portal called sebenarnya.my, okay, to ensure that genuine news and information reaches the public. The portal gathers online and printed news and confirms the authenticity of the news. But how many of us actually go to this website to check whether it is news or it is not news, or it is fake news, if you wish, right? So you have rules and regulations, you try to help the public, but ask yourself this question: how many of us actually go to this website and check, right? So when a state emergency was declared in Malaysia on January 2021, the Malaysian government introduced a new anti-fake news ordinance to further curb the spread of misinformation on COVID-19. Okay, under this law, those found guilty of publishing fake news, there was a fine of 100,000, 3-year prison term, with a daily fine of 1,000 for repeated offenders. Okay, so there was a lot of rules and regulations put in place, right? Now, further to that, despite all these measures, right, they admit, MCMC admits that legal action cannot be taken against the culprits of fake news unless someone reports it. So if you know, go and report. If you're going to stay quiet, this is never going to get solved. All right. So at present, sharing fake content is an offense under Section 233 of the Communication and Multimedia Act, 1998. Okay, very draconian, and carries a maximum fine of 50,000 or a jail term not exceeding 1 year, both. Right. For example, look at our neighbor Singapore. A survey conducted by the government's feedback unit REACH found that the majority of the residents have come across fake news on Facebook or WhatsApp. The report states that 7 out of 10 could not recognize that the news that they received was fake at the time they read it. All right, it's the same thing for us. We don't know. All right, my first point of reference will always be friends that are still in the newsroom. Right, but most of my friends will tell me what's going on, but some will not, right? So where do you check? So these are the portals where you can check here in Malaysia, or you can check with government portals, all right? I think the most favorite government portal in the last 2 years has been KKM, all right? So if you see their Instagram, their Facebook, and then some follow the DG. DG is such a celebrity. He's the only person in Malaysia that has the most PCs in 2020, in 2021. All right. Even the Prime Minister doesn't have as many. All right. It doesn't matter which Prime Minister. Okay. So my last point is this. Okay. So how is it going now? The global and local media industry has been hard hit by the fast-growing new digital technology and big internet platforms even before the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay. Now, many media organizations have gone under. Thousands of journalists have lost their jobs in many countries, including Malaysia, right? So mainstream media went with digital, but it is a totally different realm which powerful global players in control of platform and content dissemination, which gives them the bulk of the ADEX, the advertising expenditure, right? So the COVID pandemic restrictions reduced economic activity and expenditure further, including for advertising, right? Who wants to advertise now? Nobody, right? So what does this mean for journalists in this day and age? For the media and journalists, this is a crystal clear message, right? In my opinion, this is the time when journalists is needed the most. Strip away the politics of things, keep the partisanship away for a bit, right? Because some of the journalists that were let go tried to have a balanced view and they were let go because of that, which I don't understand why, all right? Is it detrimental to the government because you're not supporting? You are the watchdog. You are the gatekeepers. If you are doing your job, why did you lose your job? That's the biggest question, right? The different impacts and results from last year till now are in plain sight for everyone to see. Look at New Zealand, all right? By far, in my opinion, has been the gold standard in managing the pandemic, all right? You can disagree with me, it's all right. Unified in leadership, steadfast in following the science, daring to make the hard decisions, and to stop it all off, clarity in communicating to the masses, all right? Unified in leadership. This is something that we don't have. Look at Malaysia, the last 3 years, 3 prime ministers. What? Okay? Steadfast in following the science. At least the DG hasn't lost his plot, although he did comment that his hands were tied at one point and he was getting very frustrated also, right? Daring to make the hard decisions. In New Zealand and also in Australia, they have 30 cases. They will go for a lockdown. What happened in Malaysia? We waited until it got out of hand. And then there was this sick joke that went around. Okay, let's wait until it goes 20,000. Let's go until it goes 21,000. Oh my God, it was so frightening for all of us, okay? And clarity to communicating to the masses, all right? You need to be clear. What is it that you want to deliver to your masses? You want SOPs? Why do you have 100 SOPs for the pandemic? All right, cut down. It was confusing for a lot of people. All right, it was worrying and it was frightening with mental health issues and all that. All right. So when I got invited to speak for the Sarawak initiative, right? I had a chat with an old friend of mine. You might know him. He used to work at AstroAWANI, Kamaro Bahrain. He's an old friend, right? So we were talking about this, about how is it for journalists now? So these are some points that we agreed upon, all right? So this is not mine alone. This is coming from the journalist himself, okay? So in the age of the pandemic, where many are lost and few gains are made, the need for journalism to flourish has never been more important. Question is, will the journalists be encouraged to do more, or will they be subjected to do less? The ecosystem matters. Political will matters. Inclusiveness matters. Transparency matters. Truth, above all else, matters. Trust matters. Then only can journalism really matter. Okay? Because you have to have the freedom in order for you to write, in order for you to disseminate this information. So it's not fake, it's all factual, all right? From freedom of information, access to data, to investment in advocating literacy and awareness as parts of the war against COVID-19. So success here, ladies and gentlemen, it is not a static point, but a forever moving target. So the battle for the hearts and minds must be won together. We need to come together in order for us to fight this, right? I have left the industry for 2 decades, so that's how long I've been teaching. I don't teach. I basically train the students for broadcasting based on the training that I got when I was at TV3. So that was a lot of fun for me. It's sad, right? I might be wrong. You might not want to agree with me on this one, but I'm just looking at TV3 alone, right? It's very sad. From the outside looking in, it looks like they have lost the plot in terms of journalism. So that's quite sad. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to reiterate my last point, that we need to come together in order for us to fight this, to fight COVID-19, and also to fight fake news if journalism could and must matter the most. Thank you.